Listen, I need to be straight with you about something that's been bothering me. The Blue Jays situation with Kyle Tucker and Bo Bichette is absolutely insane right now, and I'm seeing reports left and right that are making this whole thing feel like we're just going in circles. But here's what's actually happening that nobody's really putting together. Ken Rosenthal dropped a bomb yesterday saying Toronto is the leader for Kyle Tucker right now. Think about that for a second. Ken Rosenthal doesn't just throw that out there for clicks. This is a guy who's connected to front offices across the league, and when he says Toronto's leading, that means something real is happening behind the scenes. But here's where it gets complicated, and honestly, a little frustrating. We've got Mark Feinsand coming out with industry sources saying the Blue Jays are still the likely destination for Tucker. And get this, the quote from his sources says, once they gave Vladdy the extension, they sent a message they're going all in. Signing Dylan Cease was huge, but adding Tucker would finish off an impressive 12 months. Robert Murray said a few days ago that Tucker actually wants to play for the Jays. These reporters aren't making this stuff up, and at this point, it's not just leverage talk anymore. But then last night, John Heyman throws a wrench in everything, saying the Mets are very much in the mix for Tucker. Now, look, I'm going to be honest with you. Tucker's camp knows exactly what they're doing here. This smells like leverage. If Tucker isn't getting the money he wants from Toronto, and clearly he isn't because the Jays aren't willing to give him $400 million, then suddenly the Mets being interested creates pressure. It's the oldest trick in the book. You leak to Heyman that another big market team is involved, and suddenly Toronto has to make a decision. Ken Rosenthal even came back and said the Mets can't rely on a short-term high AAV deal if they want a realistic chance at Tucker. The market exists to go longer for these players, and that's the position he's going to be in. That's actually great news for Toronto because they're willing to go long-term. They've shown that with their entire approach this offseason. Now here's where things get really interesting, and honestly, a little scary if you're a Blue Jays fan. Bo Bichette's market is heating up in a way nobody expected. John Heyman reported yesterday that Bo is looking for somewhere around $300 million. Let that sink in. $300 million for a guy who's had injury concerns and hasn't put up MVP numbers recently. But the Phillies are serious. They've scheduled a meeting with Bo. They're doing extensive work on roster ripple effects, which means they're figuring out how to move Alec Bohm. They're meeting on a video conference in the coming days, and their interest is legitimate. The connection everyone's talking about is Don Mattingly. He left Toronto and went to Philadelphia, and he had a really close relationship with Bo. That matters more than people think in these decisions. Players want to be comfortable. They want familiar faces. And Mattingly being there gives the Phillies a real advantage. There's even chatter from sources saying the Phillies are the favorite right now to sign Bo. And if that happens, they'd move Bohm and potentially move on from other pieces. Here's what's driving me crazy about all this. If the Blue Jays lose Bo and then miss on Tucker, this goes from a really solid offseason to a complete disaster. Yeah, they signed Vladdy long-term. Yeah, they got Soto money. They brought in Kazuma Okamoto. They traded for Dylan Cease. But you can't go into the season without adding one of these elite bats. Your lineup is better than last year, but it's not championship caliber yet. You're not done. You can't be done. The pressure is mounting now, and that's why we're seeing all these reports flying around. Tucker's camp is using the Mets to create urgency. Bo's camp is using the Phillies meeting to show Toronto they're serious about leaving if the money isn't right. And Toronto is sitting there trying to figure out which move makes the most sense. Do they go all in on Tucker knowing Bo might walk? Do they make a last-minute push for Bo to keep the core together? These are massive decisions that will define this franchise for the next 5 years. What makes this even crazier is that both situations could resolve in the next week or two. Bo's meeting with the Phillies is coming up. Tucker's market is clearly getting close to a decision point because we're not hearing about new teams anymore, just the same 3 or 4 names circling. When that happens, when markets tighten up like this, deals get done fast. One domino falls, and suddenly everything moves. I've been covering this team every single day, and I'm telling you right now, this feels different than the usual off-season speculation. There's real momentum here. The Jays have increased their efforts on Tucker. They're not panicking about Bo reportedly, which tells me they've maybe accepted he's leaving, or they're confident they can replace him with Tucker. Either way, something big is about to happen. The other thing nobody's talking about enough is the arbitration situation with Eric Swanson. They avoided it with Ernie Clement and a couple others, but Swanson's heading to a hearing. That's going to be tricky because he barely played 2 years ago and then dominated last year in a weird role. Figuring out fair value there is tough, but honestly, that's the least of their concerns right now. Bottom line, this is getting out of hand in the best and worst way possible. It's exciting because the Jays are clearly in on major talent. It's frustrating because we keep hearing the same reports without resolution. But make no mistake, decisions are coming soon. Whether it's Tucker signing long-term, Bo heading to Philly, or the Mets somehow swooping in, we're about to get answers. And when we do, the entire trajectory of this team changes. That's not hyperbole, that's just reality. The next 2 weeks will define everything.